How's everyone doing? Jason V. Sareev, AXIOM TV, one man think tank, which is what we all are. Um, this video, we're going to use philosophy for what it is intended for. This video this video is about the people versus the United States government. And before we go into that, excuse me, it is my belief that philosophy does not just teach us how to die well or properly. Or you know what? We can stick to that definition. Actually, we can stick to that definition, because an aspect of that is solving problems, and that to me is what philosophy is for. Philosophy is an extension of thinking. It's deep thinking. So on life's questions, on life, on reality. And one aspect of reality that it seems that all the famous luminaries such as Stephen Hawking, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Richard Dawkins, and others, that I've noticed that it seems that they avoid. Even Einstein himself, even the great Einstein and Tesla, whoever you can think of, whoever you can name, or many of them, I noticed they did not really give a serious thought to the problems of society. And I figure, since I happen to be a thinker, I might as well try, or I might as well make an attempt. Now, full disclosure, I'm no lawyer, but I think a little bit. First, let's go into the conditions we currently find ourselves in. Now, as for myself, I don't like to complain much. It is too reflexive just to do that. There is already a chorus of complaining voices about the problems, and they don't need my help in doing any more of it. Instead, what I'd like to choose to focus my energy on is on solutions. And though I get it, there is a deafening decibel of complaining due to people feeling helpless to do anything else about it, lacking viable alternatives. We've all tacitly realized that violent revolution is not an option to bring about the necessary change needed. And revolution at this point, or a change in the system, is not only it's past due. So no one should feel shocked when I use that word. The country was built on it, after all. Now, many of us are patriots, not out of affection, but out of not knowing any better, or realizing that there is no militarily defeating the powers that be, the ruling few. Excuse me again. So many so-called patriots, they join and become patriots to compensate for that lack of control, if you will. Another good reason why violent revolution is not an option. By my work, our leaders have the psyche and mindset so their psyche and mindset so fixated on sustaining control, regardless of how intensely detrimental that control may become to their citizens, that they inadvertently adopt the policy of cutting their nose off to spite their face to maintain that control. This is demonstrated in whites overall, focusing the general function of the country, of Western society overall, really, on not improving the standard of living of its citizens, but primarily on sustaining white privilege. This is done despite recurring proof of the degenerative effects this causes to the minds of whites themselves. Is revolution a possibility? Is it even a possibility? At the power center of Western society, the ruling few are the base of this mindset. If they were to ever feel a real threat to their brand of control, they will respond in a self-destructive manner. This is demonstrated in the fact that extreme privilege, which is what white privilege is essentially a suicidal tendency. The ruling few will throw the ultimate tantrum, simply due to them having the ability to take the rest of us out with them. None of us are under any illusions that our government would not turn their weapons on their own citizens to maintain that power, no matter if there was an exponentially better system to substitute it that they were aware of, and the majority of the people demanded it. We know this due to the amount of effort and resources that are constantly exhausted by them and expended in promoting otherwise. If you've ever read the books The Prince by Machiavelli or The Art of War by Sun Tzu, two of world leaders' favorites as a reading option, you'd have an idea of the mindset and strategy of the ruling few. Those two books are like their Bible. Know your enemy. So tactically, I do not advocate violent revolution. There's very good reasons not to engage in such. It's futile. It's futile. Now, though the political process is advocated as a way to bring about change, as many of us now realize, it does not bring about significant change whatsoever. Now, this does not mean that revolution is not an option. Revolution is actually a necessity and requirement of nature. It is the name we give to the world turning. When you break down the word, you see that it is the recurrence of the process of evolution, re-evolution. It is evolving, and being that we are human beings, a cerebral species, we are mandated by nature to develop intellectually, not subjectively or in mostly emotion. This is why nature has its own Declaration of Independence clause of a right to revolution. It arms us with our minds, with our very own minds. We are to be engaging in the fundamental evolution over time. It is our minds that have evolved, human thinking. Our societies are a collection of minds after all. We are to use our minds to compel the oppressive power center to definitively change its operations for the betterment of the general population. That said, I propose that we put the idea of civilization to the test. Engage in mass intellectual anarchy. Now, what do I mean by that? Intellectual anarchy. That means to think for yourself in the way nature intended you to, at the highest level, which would be objective thinking, without bias, free from bias, being that nature is without bias. It functions indiscriminately. It's at this type of point that, and I'm from the old school or middle school, whichever it is at this point. I'm from the generation that I would be saying at this point, what would MacGyver do? And that would be, he would do the best with the constraints that he found himself in. And that's exactly the same template that we need to mimic. We need to attack the problem in the only way that we are left with, intellectually. I am proposing that each person not only thinks for themselves, but they free their minds of degenerative cultural control, known as patriotism, or the other nuances involved in cultural mind control. That said, in this first meeting of thinkers, partners in minds, you and I propose the motion that we adopt a proposal made by the late but more significantly great El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, aka Malcolm X, and one currently being attempted by Dr. Claude Anderson. And that is, we litigate the government in international court, or in court. There is such a thing, believe it or not, or there is such an idea that has been enacted, believe it or not. The families of 9/11 sued the Saudi Arabian government. I don't see any reason why the people of the United States should not be able to do the same against its own government, who promotes freedom and justice and equality. One of the options that we could use as a place to bring litigation against the US government would be the International Court. And their last big case, to my recollection, was a ruling against China's asserting itself militarily in the South China Sea. Now let's discuss the potential case that we could mount, and what possible merits for that case there would be. First, we would have to set the terms in our favor. We would sue not only the government, the US government, but the corporations who promote and benefit from their tyranny, such as the mainstream media outlets, for example. Also, we would want the ability for individuals to be held personally liable. And what that means would be the ability to be able to claw back financially the assets of individuals in government or executives and owners and corporations who promote and benefit from the tyrannical actions of the United States government. We're not talking about any of their good actions. We're talking about the tyrannical actions. Now, unlike corporations are allowed to do in civil court, we would also want that these individuals, as well as the government and their corporations, would have to admit wrongdoing. Presently, that does not. That's a tradition that we have in Western society's business district. Business never has to admit wrongdoing. They just pay a fine. And that fine is being paid by passing the cost on to the customer. So they just go on continuously doing more predatory practices. This is tyrannical, is it not? Now, if you think about it, society is a social contract. And if we can show that the government and these corporations and their executives and owners have violated their own terms and conditions of that social contract, then I don't see how any reasonable court would not rule in our favor. Also, let's employ the strategy of holding the power structure, the power center, holding them to the right to overthrow clause in the Declaration of Independence. It implies that the government is to be active in the prevention of oppressive and tyrannical behavior by its members. This is an area I believe that we, the people, can exploit in our favor. I've already brought up patriotism, but one of the reasons why I would want to go at that as a part of our case is because if you think about it, it is a technique of mind control. And actually the whole cultural apparatus, what we call Western culture, is a form of mind control on the majority classes in those countries, Western societies. You have what is known as white culture, which is an offensive culture. It's always seeking to disavow any wrongdoing and point out any flaw that it can find within you and emphasize it and exaggerate it. And then you have defensive cultures to whatever minority class that lives within Western society. And that would be the totality of Western culture. And patriotism is a part of that. And to me, patriotism, by my work, is a self-defeating. It's on its face, it seems like it's something beautiful, but really it's only a romantic and poetic concept. In reality, it's a self-defeating mechanism and device of control, and it undermines the right to revolution clause. Next, if you think about it, all forms of government are dictatorships, including democratic ones, which would mean the ones in Western society as well. Unless the government is not set against its citizens, this is the only way it could not be a dictatorship. If the government is not set against its citizens. And in Western society, governments are set against their citizens. All governments' first mandates are establishing control and maintaining control, and this includes democratic ones. Everything else follows after. The political system here is bogus, and that's the reason why we never have any significant change for the better, as we've discussed already. And we knew that this system was bogus beforehand because it was opined by Plato through the use of Socrates in his plays. And Plato is someone, and his disdain for democracy is something that is studied in universities all throughout Western society. It is also nonsensical to decide our future and our leaders based on emotions instead of intellect. Another problem is our political system and our laws are constantly left open to abuse by members of government. There is never any substantive effort by them to completely eradicate corruption to resolution. Also, the election process is a waste of time and resources. In the United States, you can go through the whole process and it still not be decided by a majority vote. The last two Republican presidents were elected by 550 people, were decided by 550 people in a country of millions. This is known as the electoral college process. There is constant internal manipulation of elections, gerrymandering, the buying of elections by donors, the DNC versus Bernie Sanders, to name a few examples. It's not only manipulation by Russia, allegedly, that is at fault with that is a flaw with the political system. The entire thing is fraudulent. The financial system is predatory. Some examples of this is the proposal of the um, some examples of this are that we are compelled to have our retirement funds in the financial system, only to have it constantly being schemed upon and nibbled at by financial institutions. And they never provide you, or they rarely return they never hold to their side of the bargain in the relationship of reciprocity by providing you, generally, by providing uh, people with their clients for the most part with a comfortable retirement. But their retirement seems to always be fine off of living off of their clients. So therefore, they're basically like parasites living on their hosts. Also, putting people in debt, like credit card companies have been allowed to. No government that actually works for the people should be allowed to unleash the predatory tendencies and whims of corporations upon their population just for the sake of doing it, just because they are allowed to do it. That means that that government was never about protecting the people in the first place. Another problem with our financial system, or consequences of it, is that we end up, instead of breeding good citizens, we end up breeding high level over emotional consumers and patriots, not thinkers or cerebral beings like nature intended us to be or birthed us to be. Another consequence of capitalism is the divide and conquer aspect of it. It only sets us against each other, leaving the name the United States as deliberately misleading. If this is the system that we adopted, a financial system that we adopted, one that sets us against each other. And many a time you'll find that we are constantly forced, because of this system, to work against our own better interests. Not for our better interests, rather than for our better interests, excuse me. When we want to talk about societal themes, when we hide behind values such as liberty and the pursuit of happiness, freedom, and equality, even these, due to their, even these are misleading in nature. And we should seek to have an injunction brought against the government to keep them, to prevent them from using it until they have actually, until these concepts are actually being acted out in sincerity. Another aspect that you'll notice that I think we could exploit in litigation is the fact that they sell us dreams, and they actually make no secret of this. For one, the American dream. Then, if you think about it, we're all told about to be chasing a dream house. We are to be chasing a dream house as the purpose of our life. Chasing a dream car, a dream job, a dream girl or guy. Chase your dream life. Even our heroes are sold to us as dreams, such as Martin Luther King. Though he spoke of many other topics, the one that we all mostly know him for, due to that's the one that is promoted to us, is Martin Luther King's dream. Even our religion is dreamy in its convenience alone. But let's review what a dream is. A dream is something that is not real, something that you cannot control. Therefore, why is it what we're promoting is what we are to be chasing in society? That's fraudulent on its face alone. It seems that that's not the only reason, that's not the only thing that is based on smoke and mirrors. And there's a good reason for them selling us dreams. It's because it seems that every other institution in society is based in appearance as well, less than, rather than being substantive, excuse me. We hide behind values instead of actually living them out. Life, liberty, and pursuit is not actually a reality in our policy. It's only words. Instead, what happens in fact is that in day-to-day life, the government is oppressing life, trying to tamper liberty. And is not focused on our well-being whatsoever, but their own growing control, but growing their control. So who could sue, and for what? Well, it's my proposal that everyone should sue. Everyone who has issues with the government should bring class action lawsuits. Take it to civil action. Make a coordinated civil action. Such as women. Women could sue for gender bias and inequality. That's a continued theme in our society of patriarchy. They could sue for the system of living under the oppression of the system of patriarchy. It appears all through the language. There's quite a few words within our language that you could tell are specifically there to suggestively program women to feel that they're inferior beings to men. Many words are crafted to oppress them. This is also done to the earth tone people, that earth tone citizens of the United States or Western society. And blacks should sue the system for the obvious racism, aka white privilege, the artificial inflation of whites socially as well as financially. Earth tone people around the world are owed substantial punitive damages, and for pain and suffering as well. the topic has come up as of reparations. By itself, it's a neutral word, but it has gained a negative connotation whenever mentioned with blacks or attributed to blacks. There's quite a few things that follow from that blacks could sue for. Um, Also, whites should sue. I hear the alt-right and all these white nationalist groups, if they have issues with the government, they should take those issues to litigation if they really feel as strongly as I do why I'm suggesting this solution. If anything, this may aid them in their qualms, or at least they could actually demonstrate to their followers that they are more than being that their leaders are being more than prosperity preachers to them. But to me, sincerely, whites in general should sue the government for financial and psychological oppression. The system of racism has made you giving you delusions of grandeur. It's made you overly complacent, insecure, pretentious, mentally fragile, if you will, if we're to be honest. I mean, if you don't notice this about yourself as a group, that alone is proof that grounds for that particular charge. Also, such as the system of patriotism and the mind control that is used against you. So white privilege definitely is something that you should sue for, because it actually works detrimental to you. You've been made to think that it would fundamentally benefit you all as a group, but instead it is only benefiting the 1% of you, and the rest of you are just playing along as if you are benefiting, but really all you're doing is being bred to breed offspring to continue to support a system that is only focused on taking care of the top few people that control it. Even amongst the group of whites that think that totally they are the ones that are running everything or being the tyrants. Really, no, you yourselves are being oppressed within your group. So much for racism, or so much for the definition of racism. Another group that you'd be surprised that I think should sue are criminals. Criminals within the prison and probation system, the correction system of the United States or Western society, first should sue for hypocrisy by the members of government, being that members of government essentially commit the same crimes as some of our worst criminals, in how their policies affect the lives of others, and for their crimes being the result of them, products, and also criminals should sue for their crimes being the result of them being products of the societal environment that they were raised in, which was furbished by the state, ultimately. Now, in terms of grounds, I don't see why negligence, gross negligence at that, dereliction of duty, mass fraud, loss of wages, loss of opportunity, political malpractice, RICO laws. It runs the gambit when you really think of it. Now, what would be against us? Well, as we've already mentioned a few times in this video, patriots. It will be an uphill battle because they will be the first layer that will protect the ruling 1% ruling class to the death, irregardless if it barely benefits them or only superficially benefits them. These people might they're so invested emotionally that I don't know if truth, objective truth, no matter how, or truth, no matter how objective it is, will ever get through to them, or no matter how polite you put it. Um, but don't forget that our main opponents will be the wealthy and the government, and we all already know that cases can get tied up and dragged out in litigation. And our opponents do not want to give up their privilege under any circumstances. I can't see any circumstances, regardless of how moral or intellectual it would be for them to do so, that the ruling few would relinquish their control. I just can't see any circumstance where they would do it, short of violence or being made to do so somehow. The very also, when discussing the mechanism of patriotism, the human being, when we consider patriots, we have to remember the human being is also an animal. Adam Smith mentioned this in one of his books. The great Adam Smith, by the way. The human being is essentially a wild animal. And when I say wild, I don't want you to remember that's our human perspective of what wild really is. That's what we view as wild. But when we say so we use the word wild to describe that behavior because we don't really we don't consider it orderly to how we consider order or to how we view order. So the human being is essentially a natural animal is what I want to say, that has been domesticated by patriotism. And that is how we are to see patriots. They are simply human beings that were once attuned to nature and have now been domesticated by the concept of patriotism. Now, for these types, not only are they automatons and sheep, but they are so much so that if you open the cage, they would go nowhere. They would be just like one of those animals that are broken, that have been fully domesticated. Those type of animals believe they cannot survive without their master. And that is what patriotism basically teaches us as citizens to view the ruling class as masters that we cannot live without. Though, as far as I can tell, I see no use for the wealthy whatsoever, other than them being a consistent cancer to society throughout history. I see no beneficial use for the wealthy. Society could get on without them. So why do we have them, is the question. So that's another ground we could bring against the members of government and the corporations and their owners and executives that support them. So that's one idea of mental anarchy, one example of mental anarchy, to not seek to just complain about the problem, but let's make value of this time. We don't have time to be alive forever. We're bringing kids into this. How can we say we love our children and that we have children because we love them? We we rear offspring because out of love, when we're bringing them deliberately into a situation that we know is idiotic, yet prevalent. Get involved. I want to hear from you. What do you think? You're a human being as well. You have the same tool as Socrates, Rene Descartes, Cornel West, any great mind that has existed in history. You possess that same tool between your ears. Use it. What do you think? Join the movement. Be a mental anarchist. Think for yourself. Think objectively. And realize your true potential of genius. Thank you. Oh, subscribe, AXIOM TV. Hit the notification icon, so that you can keep abreast of all the latest content. Thank you.